What's up guys, xHOUNDISHx here, and today I wanted to talk about exotic primaries in Destiny PvP, and specifically those weapons which I think deserve a buff to seat them back inside of the metagame in general Crucible. The reason I say this is because I feel like Bungie kind of got scared of exotic primaries going into year 2. You know, Hawkmoon, Thorn, and Red Death were all pretty much god tier weapons, which suddenly went down to a kind of mid-tier quality and then didn't really change. And I for one think exotic primaries should feel powerful in the Crucible and should be kind of an important decision when setting up a loadout. So initially, there are a couple of weapons which I think could be way more exciting. Firstly, Red Death. Now, Red Death is an incredibly powerful weapon in terms of its bonuses. Health regeneration and speedy reloads on kills is pretty fantastic for PvP in a primary weapon, and in year 1 this was absolutely a standout exotic for all activities, yet the Red Death archetype is kind of lackluster right now in terms of PvP damage compared to other weapons. The godly hand cannons can easily beat Red Death in medium ranges, and the higher rate of fire pulse rifles can win out at more or less any range. Even most scout rifles will easily win a lot of engagements against a Red Death, and I'd love to see Red Death become an effective PvP weapon again, but of course it's not just as simple as damage buffs. We're kind of at this awkward stage with the archetype design of weapons. For example, Red Death can still 3-burst kill technically. If you buff its damage enough to 2-burst kill, then that's just way too strong. If you buff the damage only a small amount and stay in that 3-burst kill range, then it kind of doesn't make a ton of difference, especially because of the rate of fire. So damage isn't necessarily the thing to worry about, which is why Bungie did start changing archetypes on weapons, things like Hopscotch Pilgrim for example, to be a different archetype entirely. And this is kind of what I think could help with Red Death. I think an increase in rate of fire would be pretty nice, not to make it the Hawksaw archetype, but just to bump the rate of fire up a small amount. Perhaps make a new archetype of Pulse Rifle, which is closer to the Hawksaw rate of fire, but closer to the damage of the Red Death archetype. That's just an idea, but for Red Death in particular, I'd also like to see its stability and target acquisition improve. You could take something like a well-rolled Hopscotch Pilgrim and easily hit more shots against most targets, but against the high flinch weapon meta in general, Red Death really suffers in terms of landing the shots, let alone worrying about damage. It's a complicated issue for sure, and I'm not going to be the one to provide the answers on how to do it. I just know that I speak for a lot of players when I say I'd love to see this weapon be competitive again. Up next is Hawkmoon though. This is a really cool weapon for PvP. Its holding aces or luck in the chamber procs have always made it a very fearsome weapon in the Crucible, but currently Hawkmoon's stats kind of put it in a bad place. So back in the April update period, Hawkmoon was in a pretty decent spot. It didn't have rifle barrel IS Luna range or anything like that, but it handled pretty well, and even without having the range capability or the mad aim assist which it had in year 1, it felt pretty good because you could easily lose out to pulse rifles or other hand cannons, but if you used it well and positioned yourself well, you could take advantage of its bonuses. When Bungie went ahead and changed the range stats for hand cannons a few months back, on the whole, they said they needed to take Hawkmoon down a peg as it would become too powerful, and one of the main hits it took was to its stability. As a result, Hawkmoon just doesn't feel that nice to use right now. It's got a really horrible balance of vertical and horizontal recoil, which make the kick kind of hard to control, but more than that, the kick just feels really artificial and doesn't handle the same way that most other hand cannons do. And by extension, now when you're being hit by more high flinch weapons, it's super hard to hit your shots with Hawkmoon. Again, it's a difficult one to balance because if the range and target acquisition end up at a year 1 status, combined with the amount of luck in the chamber rounds that you get with the weapon, it will be pretty strong, and I guess the problem is that it's kind of unpredictable to fight against. It's too capable of suddenly ending a fight because you could have that really high damage round, which I agree is annoying to play against. So what I think could work for Hawkmoon, and I'm not saying this is the best answer, but for me, I think the effective range and target acquisition should be closer to what they used to be, but honestly I would change the holding aces perk to compensate for this. I would rather Hawkmoon had a good consistent shot, yet proc to look in the chamber less, which could make it generally more balanced. Hawkmoon in comparison to IS Luna or Palindrome is just another example of Bungie staying on the safe side, and again, I think more exotics should be truly effective in the Crucible. There are some good exotics to contrast in general though. I don't personally believe that any exotics are truly the best in their class on the most part, but things like Talok for the Warlock is very strong, the Last Word hand cannon, or Outbreak Prime even, which is in the Hawksaw archetype of pulse rifles, and then things like Bully and Gemini, for me are all good examples of either very strong, unique enough, or roughly equal to the best legendary weapons, which I think would be a good way for Bungie to think about balance. If Red Death, Hawkmoon, and even Bad Juju could sit in a similar bracket where they're near to being as good as the popular legendary alternatives, then I think it would encourage more diversity in PvP, because a lot of the weapons are truly capable of being balanced out, yet seem to yo-yo from being very strong to pretty much redundant. Even the absolute best of the exotic primaries in the game have legendary contenders, which in a lot of cases have better stats, and I feel like in general most exotics need to be made more appealing to use. You do have those weapons like Fabian's Strategy or the First Curse, which kind of carry archetypal problems, and these will always be an issue, but it feels on the whole like there is a lot of good stuff which is kind of being ignored as opposed to addressed in PvP. And if there is going to be a weapon balance patch in the near future, which I think there should, then I would be really happy to see any of the weapons I've mentioned change to switch things up a bit. In general, I'd just like to see exotic primaries be closer to those, kind of super popular current legendary weapons inside of the Crucible. But those are my thoughts anyway, guys. I know that was a bit of a strange way to look at it. We looked at a couple of very specific weapons and then kind of generalized a lot of stuff, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. Hopefully we will get that balance patch coming up pretty soon and some of this stuff may change. But let me know what you guys think down below. Would you rather things kind of stayed as they are and the legendaries were the more powerful thing, or do you think that exotics should kind of creep up there at least? I wouldn't have a problem with them being the most powerful weapons, but I understand that that isn't entirely the best approach or the most balanced thing to do for the general player base. So either way, let me know down below what you guys think. Which exotics do you think should be stronger, or do you think mostly things are okay as they are? If you have enjoyed this video though, a like is always appreciated down below. If you're new to the channel, also feel free to hit subscribe for a lot more Destiny content, but for now you guys have an awesome day.